was our wonderful Jason Isaacs there, providing the break entertainment. Just a quick reminder that our competitions close at midnight tonight, UK time, because I know there's a few of you watching overseas. And just to remind you that we do have a Q&A section. If it's not on your bottom taskbar, click on More. It'll be in there. If you have a question for our main guest this evening. And our Bay Tales spotlight tonight is on Martin Edwards, who was born in Knutsford, Cheshire, and educated at Balliol College, Oxford, taking a first-class honours degree in law. Ooh. Martin spent 2 years as the chair of the CWA, Crime Writers Association, and in 2015 he was elected 8th president of the Detection Club. He is also archivist of the CWA and of the Detection Club. Martin's known for his fantastic fiction, as well as non-fiction like The Golden Age of Murder and How Done It. Martin is a member of the Murder Squad, a crime writing collective that's celebrating 21 years this year. To mark this important year, they will be publishing a new anthology called Many Deadly Returns, 21 stories celebrating 21 years of the Murder Squad. Martin has won awards on both sides of the Atlantic, including the, get ready for this, Edgar, Agatha, McCavity and Poirot Awards, and most recently, the CWA Diamond Dagger in 2020. Woo! So everybody, please join me in welcoming the wonderful Martin Edwards.
Well, thank you, Vic, and hello everyone, and thanks for asking me along. It's great to be joining you and to take part in Bay Tales, which is doing such terrific work for crime writers all over the place. So thank you for that too.
Thank you. I'm going to dive straight in if that's all right, but I am going to keep intermittently encouraging our audience members to drop some questions in. So we've got 3 series: Liverpool solicitor Harry Devlin, the Lake District Mysteries with Anna Scarlett and Daniel Kind. And please forgive me, is it Rachel Savanake?
I pronounce it Savanake, others differ, but that's the way I pronounce it.
Excellent.
Cheshire accent, you see, Cheshire pronunciation.
And also Jacob Flint. How do you manage to keep a series fresh over the course of several books?
Well, I think that I've always loved reading series, and I love writing them. But of course, it is important, both as a reader and as a writer, not to get the same old, and that is a trap that it's quite tempting to fall into, because if you have loyal readers, you want to continue to please them. As well as hopefully attracting new readers. But I think that there are various techniques I think you can employ. The late Reginald Hill, who's a wonderful writer, the creator of Diel and Pascoe, he was a great believer in alternating, so he would never write 2 consecutive books about Diel and Pascoe, and that was one of the early pieces of advice that he gave to me, along with never wait for a publisher to reply to your emails, that sort of thing. But he was very prolific, and I've not been able to alternate novels in the way that he did, because I've not written anything like as many books as he has done. But what I've done, amongst other things, is that I've written short stories in between novels. And short story, I love short stories. I love reading them, I love writing them. And they give you the chance of a change of pace, a change of scene, a change of period maybe. You might write a historical short story, something like that. You can do something different. You can take risks. And you very kindly invited me to write a piece for your lovely website about short stories. So I've waffled on about short stories at some length on the Bay Tales website. And there are pieces of fiction that I really enjoy, both as a reader and a writer. And it's a good way of getting away from one novel and getting in the mood to write another novel. So that's certainly one of the techniques that I adopt, as well as trying to do something different with every book, even if it's in the same series as the last one. I think always trying to add a fresh ingredient of some kind, maybe a different point of view, something like that.
So in a way, you almost use a short story as a palate cleanser then?
Very much so, yeah. And short stories give you a lot as a writer as well as a reader. Certainly, when I was thinking about Gallows Court, which is a big departure for me as a novelist, and I knew that I was taking quite a gamble. I was creating a new character. I was going to write it in a different situation, not knowing how it was going to end. And most of the other novels I've written, I've known how they would end, even if I didn't know how I get to the end. I knew what the climax was going to be. And so I wrote a short story about Rachel just to see whether I liked the character enough. Because you write a novel, you spend a long time with the character. In fact, Gallows Court took 3 years to write, so it was a very, very long time. But I found with the short story that I enjoyed writing about it. And I didn't write it to publish it. It was a way of getting into the mindset of the character, and that was a very useful exercise in itself.
So a couple of things to pick up on, just based on what you've said. I gather from what you've said, you're not a massive plotter then?
Well, I certainly began in the early days with the early Harry Devlin novels as very much a plotter. And one or two of my more recent books, the second Rachel book, Mortmain Hall, which is quite a different book, even though it's in the same series, is a very elaborate, convoluted, labyrinthine, you might say, mystery novel. So there's a lot of plot in that. So it does vary. But again, it's about trying to do something different from book to book. So you're not always following the same template, or any template really. You're trying out different things and seeing how much you enjoy doing them and how well they work.
That's great. From what I've seen of your work, I believe you've written about 70 short stories and edited around 40 anthologies of crime fiction. Is that right?
Roughly so. I've lost count, but it's roughly in that order. Yeah.
Wow. Do you have a favourite that you've read, or have you just read too many that you could possibly name?
Of the short stories I've read by other authors, one of my absolute favourites is The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. That's a fantastic, utterly memorable, utterly compelling short story. I think Edgar Allan Poe is a great short story writer. Some of his tales of mystery and imagination. He didn't just create the first classic detective. He did all sorts of extraordinary things with short stories. Incredibly gifted writer. And then you have, outside the crime genre, people like William Trevor, John Cheever, people like that. So a whole range of authors, and of course Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote a lot of novels, but I think his best work is almost invariably in the short story. It suits some writers particularly, I think.
And following on, just with regards to the anthologies that you've produced, you've featured some of the greatest crime writers and actually given some of them their first break. I believe Ian Rankin was a bit of a...
Well, it certainly wasn't Ian's debut, because Ian was somebody who started publishing in the late 80s when I was working on my first novel. And I was very interested in the younger writers, roughly of my generation, who were getting published and what they were doing, the contemporary writers. So there are a number of them. Peter Robinson was one, Andrew Taylor, Liza Cody a few years earlier was another. People like Anne Cleeves was another who I read right from the beginning. Ian was somebody who I cottoned on to straight away. I really admired what he was doing, and I was a big fan. And the extraordinary thing about Ian was, it's hard to believe now, but he'd written 12, 13, 14, 15 novels without particularly breaking through. And I asked him, the first time I was asked to put together a Crime Writers Association anthology, I put out a general call for stories. I particularly approached Ian, and he came up with a wonderful, characteristically brilliant short story. And in the little introduction, I rhapsodized about him and said I felt he was destined for greatness, and I get a lot of forecasts wrong, but that one was was spot on. So it's been wonderful to see the extraordinary success that he's achieved, and that short story he contributed actually won Short Story Dagger. It's a terrific story called Herbert in Motion. So and of course from my point of view as the editor, shepherding that into the daylight was very rewarding. You get a vicarious pleasure from and satisfaction from seeing these things take on.
Absolutely. Now you're currently president of the Detection Club.
Yeah.
Previous presidents include Agatha Christie, G.K. Chesterton, and Dorothy L. Sayers. Do you still make new members take the oath?
Yes, the idea of the Detection Club, which is, the world's first social network of crime writers, dates back to 1930. Yeah, long before Facebook and Twitter and blogs and all that kind of thing. So crime writers didn't actually know each other. So a guy called Anthony Barclay Cox, a writer I greatly admire, by the way, who wrote as Anthony Barclay and as Francis Island, he got a few people round for dinner at his house in Watford, and out of this in 1930 came this little dining club, very small, quite elitist club, but they were trying to not just bond together socially, which they did, but also trying to elevate the standards of crime fiction, which was often derided by a lot of literary critics. And that has continued for many years, although I think we're winning the battle now. I think it may not be won, but I think we're winning now. But it was rather different in 1930. So they were trying to promote the genre in all kinds of ways, but without the internet. And they did it by collaborating on books together and electing new members. But it was essentially a congenial, jokey kind of group. And so the idea was to have this jokey initiation ritual for members with an oath of allegiance, which has been changed in various ways over the years, but still continues to this day. And the Detection Club is still a relatively small group, a dining club, predominantly but not exclusively of British writers. We meet together, or met together pre-pandemic, typically 3 times a year, but that of course hasn't happened for quite a long time now. But it's a very collegiate group, and the latest book, How Done It, was something that was intended to celebrate our 90th anniversary last year, our 90th birthday, and also to celebrate the 50th anniversary of our longest standing member, Len Deighton.
Yes.
The wonderful, fantastic Len Deighton, author of the Ipcrest Files and SSGB and many other fantastic bestsellers. Of course, the pandemic rather messed up the celebrations that we planned. But the book did come out last October, and thankfully it's done well, and that's been very gratifying to me and to all the contributors.
Can you tell us a little bit about How Done It, Martin?
Well, How Done It, the idea, it was in the tradition of all the previous Detection Club books, which go back to 1930, right at the very, very start. And the first collaborative novel was 1931, Floating Admiral, so it's got a very long history. And the idea is to raise funds to keep the club going, because it's always teetered on the brink of insolvency over the last 90 years. And so the idea is that members contribute something free, gratis, and the funds go to keep the club alive. And so I had the idea of a little book with essays by a number of current members and maybe a few past members about the art and craft of crime writing. But not just how to do it, but not just a manual, but to give insight about how we do it and the ups and downs of the writer's life, something that's always fascinated me from being a small boy. So that was the basic concept. So I pitched it to the members at the AGM, the last meeting of that glorious pre-pandemic time. And they responded very enthusiastically. So I talked to HarperCollins, they gave us a contract, and then I invited members to contribute. And what I expected would be a small, perfectly formed, elegant, slim volume with about 20 pieces grew and grew because people kept sending things in. And in the end, I think almost every living member of the club contributed. And the agents and estates of about 25 deceased members, including Christie and Sayers and P.D. James and many other great names, they all contributed. They all did it for nothing, for the benefit of the club, which was very, very humbling experience. And to get these pieces in from the likes of Anne Cleeves, writing about human geography, from the likes of Ian Rankin, writing about why crime fiction is good for you, from the likes of Liza Cody, writing about the feminist perspective of crime fiction, Stella Duffy, writing about improvisation, authors talking about writer's block and how to try and get over it, techniques, the ups and downs of writing for TV and film, Simon Brett, writing dialogue, writing historical dialogue, lots and lots of different perspectives on the crime genre. And it was thrilling to receive them. Len Dayton wrote this wonderful piece about his career as a crime writer, which is what wraps up the book. Sandy McCall Smith wrote a nice piece about humour. Ruth Dudley Edwards wrote about satire. There's all sorts of different perspectives on the genre. So we finished up with 90 pieces for the 90th birthday.
Oh,
so in the end, it was a very, very big book indeed.
I was going to say it's not a thin volume, is it?
It's not a slim volume at all. It's a doorstop.
Fabulous. Well, our very own Simon Bewick, as you've probably seen, was listening to it on his travels this weekend, his illegal travels. He says several authors refer to the rules from other writers, for example, Elmore Leonard. Martin, are there any rules that you would advise aspiring writers to avoid?
Well, I'm tempted to say that I would avoid the idea of rules altogether. Rules are fine, like laws, in their way, but you can get a bit hooked up on legislation and the advantages of legislation. Having had a career as a lawyer, I can see drawbacks as well as positives to that. And I think that one of the difficulties with rules is that they can be a constraint, an artificial constraint. And so when writers or aspiring writers talk to me at workshops, events, festivals about what I would advise, well, I'm cautious in pontificating too much, because I think that different things work for different people. You know, we're a very diverse bunch. Human nature is very very diverse indeed, and what works for me might not work for somebody else. I think that one of the merits of How Done It is that you get a whole range of different perspectives. So you get Peter James not believing in writer's block, but other writers have experienced it, and it's a very personal, subjective thing. It's not about a right and a wrong view, I don't think. It's about what works for you as a writer, and of course, from the reader's perspective, what works for you as a reader. Yeah, we don't all like the same things. That's good. I mean, of course, every writer wants to be universally admired and enjoyed by the readers, but you have to be realistic. Different people have different tastes, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that it's the sheer diversity of this very broad church of the genre that is a big part of its appeal. So in terms of advice, I think the big things are, if you believe in yourself as a writer, it's about keeping going. And I'm also a great believer in the idea that you shouldn't be totally distressed by setbacks, because every writer I've ever met has experienced setbacks. We don't always admit it in the first conversation we have with somebody, but it's a truth. It's a universal truth, I think. And the key is getting over the setbacks. One thing that really upsets me is to see, and I've seen this many times over the last 30 years that I've been a published writer, published novelist, to see a really good writer give up. Writers who've achieved publication then lose their enthusiasm for all kinds of reasons, which I do understand and empathise with. And life gets in the way. There are many reasons why people give up, but I think it's good, if you can, to try to keep at it and not let those moments of despair loom too large, because there's always another possibility around the corner if you keep going. And if books don't write themselves, so you have to invest that time in getting the words down on the page, and then you've got to invest more time in making them better than they were to begin with. Certainly in my case, I spent a lot of my time rewriting what I've previously written, but you can get somewhere in the long run, I believe, as long as you believe in yourself, and of course, assuming there's some basis for that self-belief. It's not just a complete delusion, but I do think that it's easy for your confidence to be knocked. Morale is very important for a writer. And of course, the more you write, I've found that the more I've been published over the last 30 years, the more ambitious I've become as a writer, and the more risks I've taken. So I said those early Harry Devlin novels, the early Liverpool novels, were very carefully designed. And now I take more risks. I started taking more risks by about book 4 of the series, and I've continued down that path. But it's easy for morale to be knocked by setbacks. A publisher dislikes you, or dislikes your work, or your editor moves on, or somebody gives you an unkind review, whatever it may be. These are common setbacks, but I do think that having the wherewithal to keep going is, and to keep trying to improve, because that's the thing about writing. You can always write better. I'm very conscious of that. I'm acutely conscious. I can always do a bit better. I want to improve. And I think the day I start wanting to improve as a writer, it's probably the day I ought to stop writing. I hope that day will never come. But because it's been my lifelong ambition to be part of this fantastic world. But I think constantly striving to make the best of whatever talent you might have is the key with writing, and to do things differently if one thing doesn't seem to be working, which may be a reason, for instance, to try a fresh series or a different character, something like that.
Excellent, thank you. And then there's The Golden Age of Murder, which is about how members of the Detection Club changed the face of crime fiction and cast new light on unsolved murders. We're moving on really from your novels and from your own fiction practice. And I'm just wondering what you think are the different skills required for a project like that compared to fiction.
Well, there is no doubt that non-fiction is different. And I always wanted to be a writer of detective stories from being a small child. So I have still to this day the first crime story I ever wrote at the tender age of 10, which thankfully never saw the light of day in terms of.
But you're going to share it with us tonight, though, right?
Melwyn Hughes and the Big Four, 70 handwritten pages, very carefully, neatly written. I was a much neater writer then than I am now, and I always wanted to write crime fiction, but I got a job as a lawyer, and I found that I could get paid for writing legal articles. And then I saw an advert for a publisher who wanted legal books, so I started writing legal books. And that discipline of writing non-fiction was very valuable. And it's been very valuable to me as a novelist as well, partly because you learn about dealing with publishers and dealing with contracts, dealing with deadlines and all that the nuts and bolts of the writer's trade. But also, it's about getting it right. If you write a legal book, and I've written 8 or 9 legal books, equal opportunities, employment law, things like that. That was my specialist area in the law. You have to get it right. Because if you write a legal textbook, and there's something wrong with it, you're in big trouble. So that discipline of the research and trying to get things right, or as right as you can do, is very helpful. But what I tried to do with my legal books, and it was a challenge, was I tried to make them readable. And trust me, there are many totally correct, unreadable legal textbooks in the world. So in my youthful enthusiasm, I tried to write relatively entertaining legal books. Whether that was a complete success is a matter of opinion. But the books did pretty well, and I got plenty of commissions. So some people certainly did like them, and that idea of keeping the reader interested, even if it's something pretty dull, like employment law, relatively dull, is quite a good discipline, quite a good training ground. And so when I came to write The Golden Age of Murder, I'd had quite a lot of practice in writing non-fiction, but by this time I'd also written quite a number of novels. And part of writing The Golden Age of Murder, which went through many different drafts and incarnations, was applying the techniques of the novelist to the massive information that I wanted to get out there, and to make it a story. So it was a blend, if you like, of the two disciplines.
Excellent. And are you happy with the balance in your career of fiction and non-fiction?
I'm very, very happy and very glad to have had the opportunity to write in this way. The Golden Age of Murder was really a pet project, because when I started writing it, probably about 2004, very few people were interested in Golden Age fiction. Other than Agatha Christie. And it was a kind of niche idea. I thought it might be taken by a small publisher, but I didn't expect it to do well. But it was a book I wanted to write, because there were things I wanted to say about it. And then lo and behold, I'd take 10 years to write it. It goes through many versions, many people comment on it, including people who've mentioned, Anne Cleves, Peter Lovesley, Ruth Dedley Edwards. They all commented, made very valuable suggestions. I finally got it to a stage that I was happy with, and luckily for me, HarperCollins published it, and it won awards, and it really was unexpectedly transformational in my career as a writer, and indeed impacted on the novels as well, because it gave me the confidence to start writing about Rachel Savanake and the book set in the Golden Age in 1930, which is the year the Detection Club was formed. So these things connect together, as so many things do in life, unexpectedly. And I've been very fortunate as a result, because the early Harry Devlin books were meant to combine the gritty Liverpool setting with the Golden Age type plots. And that they were fun to write and critically well received, but nobody ever mentioned the Golden Age plots, because that wasn't fashionable then. But thankfully I've lived long enough and kept writing long enough for I've never been a fashionable individual, but the wheel of literary fashion has moved more in my direction in the last few years. So that's been a very, very fortunate break.
Brilliant. We have a couple of questions from your Murder Squad colleagues. I'm just going to remind our audience, we've got some excellent questions already coming in, but if you would like to ask a question of Martin, just pop it in the Q&A and I'll do my very best to ask it. So, Kath Staincliffe would like to know, do you ever sleep You're so prolific on all fronts. So just, I mean, that's a yes or no answer, but Matt, just to add on to that, I would like to know sort of how you manage it. Do you have a routine?
No, no. You see, I've always, at least until recent years, I was a full-time lawyer. I was a partner in a law firm. That's not a 9 to 5 job. So I would write in the evenings and at weekends, and you can't do that without a very supportive family. So my wife Helen and my long-suffering children were very, very generous in tolerating all the time I spent writing, and continue to spend, and asking them questions, seeking their guidance on all sorts of things. So I think that I write whenever I can. I seize every opportunity to write. Very often, as I've mentioned, the quality isn't that great first time around, but if you've written something, you can always improve it. If you don't write, you've got nothing to improve. So I devote as much time as I can to things that I care about, and as little time as I can to things like do it yourself and gardening and things I'm absolutely terrible about. So a very long list. Yeah, the list of things I'm reasonably good at is a pretty short one. So I focus on those. And the other thing that does mean something to me is this. I sometimes read about people who've had a near-death experience or something like that, and they say, yeah, from now on, I'm really going to make the most of life. And I think, well, I don't want a near-death experience particularly. I just want to take the moral of the story and just make the most of whatever time, because you never know what's around the corner. In quite a number of my novels, you find the phrase, life is short, because I believe that very strongly. And so that drives me to do what I can to have a good time, and to do things that I love doing, and to spend time with the people I love being with. And of course, that is particularly family, friends, but crime writers, crime readers, because that's the world that I love and love to belong to.
I'm still trying to get over the idea that when the Detection Club started, crime writers didn't socialise together. I haven't been to a number of festivals. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is. And the Detection Club was really historically very, very influential for that precise reason.
Yeah, excellent. And Anne Cleves would like to know how your obsession with Agatha Christie began.
Well, that all began when I was a small boy. I was 8 years old, and growing up in Cheshire, where I still live, and my parents read in the newspapers a strange story about an American who'd come to live in a little Cheshire village and had organised the village fete. But because he was a very rich man, very influential, he'd arranged a film in a marquee, but it wasn't any ordinary film. It was a world film premiere of Murder Most Foul, Agatha Christie. And he invited a celebrity to open it, but not any old person. It was Margaret Rutherford. So I was taken along to this bizarre event in this grounds of this country house in the middle of nowhere in central Cheshire. And it was utterly stunning. I'd never seen anything like it. And a helicopter whirls overhead and comes into land, and Margaret Rutherford totters down the steps, and I declare this fete open. It's extraordinary. You can see photographs of her on the internet at the fete to this day. And it was, and then I watched the film. It's not exactly Citizen Kane, Murder Most Foul, that's for sure. But at a very impressionable age, it made a big impact on me. So I went home. My grandmother was living with us at the time. She had a few Agatha Christie paperbacks. So I picked one from the shelf that had Miss Marple in, Murder at the Vicarage, started reading it. And really from that moment, I was hooked on, well, certainly Christie, but also I became a fan, and I'm a fan to this day. I love crime fiction and all that diversity we talked about. And also I wanted to write those stories as well that surprised me. I wanted to surprise other people with the twist endings and all that. So that's where it all comes from.
That's wonderful, thank you. Right, we're going to go over to audience questions now. So Alex Hawley would like to know, what was it about schools that was the hardest bit to research?
About school.
I think that's
school.
I don't understand that, sorry. Alex. Hi Martin, again this is from Alex. I really love your Rachel S series, but I'm interested in how you compiled your anthologies.
Well, anthologies, of course, it slightly depends on the brief that you're given. The very first one was back in the early 90s. It was for the Northern chapter of the Crime Writers Association, a book called Northern Blood. And that really got the taste of editing anthologies in me. I've never stopped since. But I think that what I like about anthologies as a reader is the range. And I start from the position that if you read an anthology with lots of different stories, and preferably, in my opinion, there's some connecting theme of some kind. So the book has some sort of reason for existing. It's not just a mass of disparate stuff. But the stories will be many and varied. So you're not going to like them all equally, but it may be a way of sampling an author that you've not come across before, or a style of writing you've not come across before. So it may introduce you to something fresh. So what I like to do with anthologies whenever I can do, which is most of the time, is to have that kind of variety. So you'll have a few well-known authors to attract people to the book in the first place. Publishers like that, and you can't altogether ignore publishers' demands, even if you're tempted. And then maybe the writers who are often described as middlist writers, not a term I really like or understand, because what is the middlist? It seems to comprise around 95% of writers, including me, and then some newer writers who are just at the start of the career. I mentioned Ian Rankin, we talked about him. He'd written a number of books, but he wasn't particularly well known at that time, certainly not compared to today. So that kind of range and different types of story, even if there's a connecting theme within the same book, I accept that this means that the reader won't like every story equally, but I don't think that matters. I think it's the mix that matters, and the idea that there might be something you stumble across by accident that you wouldn't ever stumble across otherwise, that all of a sudden it's a glorious discovery. I've discovered many great writers simply through reading short story anthologies, and that's the kind of experience I'm trying to give to readers of the anthologies that I edit.
Yes, certainly, and I think there may be, like you're saying, authors that you wouldn't necessarily commit to reading a full novel by because you're not familiar with them, or you don't know if that would sound like your kind of thing. But if you find them in a collection you already wanted, then that's great. Susan at the Book Trail, who I believe has done a lovely map of your latest book, would like to know, which other fictional detective would Rachel Savanake like to work with for one day if she had the chance?
Rachel, that's a fascinating question. I've not been asked that before. So thinking very quickly, I think she would respect and get on with Jane Marple. That's what I think, because Miss Marple is no fool. If you read the books, she's a sharp woman. She understands human nature, and that's the key to the success. She's lived all her life in a small village, but she understands how people are, and that, of course, is also part of the reason why those stories appeal to people from far away, different times, different eras, people who've never seen a country house in their life or met a butler in their life, but they still recognise the human element in the stories. I'm not suggesting that these are in-depth character portrayals, because that's not what Christie is trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that Marple's insight into human nature and the way that people behave, and the lies they tell and all that kind of thing, would be something that Rachel would really empathise with. So I think they would. I think they would get on.
Susan agrees, and she says she can hear the theme music now. So, right. Oh, okay. Interesting one from Susie Aspley. Will there be another Murder at the Word when pandemic allows? It was a brilliant event with the Murder Squad 2 years ago up in our neck of the woods in the northeast.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I'd love it to happen. Probably a bit too early to arrange anything in the current situation. But the Word was a fantastic venue. I was incredibly impressed with it. And the people, this was a Murder Squad event. It was 2 days over a weekend, and we had a wonderful time as a group, and meeting the readers, and doing talks on the first day, and then workshops for aspiring writers on the second day, and some very interesting people there. So that was a lot of fun to do for a whole range of reasons. And yeah, I'd definitely be up for it if the opportunity arises.
And that's what we like to hear. Right, Paul Short has asked, what has changed in crime writing thanks to technological advances since you began writing?
Oh, interesting question. Well, I think that in terms of technological advance, number one, I started writing my first novel on Little Amstrad, crude type of PC, and of course word processing. For somebody like me who does so much revision, the old sort of typewriter and Tipex wouldn't really cut it. So word processing has certainly been invaluable. And has been responsible for me writing more books than would otherwise have been the case, that's for sure. But I think that one of the interesting things is really the way that the publishing world has changed, because of course when I was young, I was growing up very much with the idea of being traditionally published, and now there are all kinds of options. You're not restricted by commercial considerations such as we've got to print 5,000 to make a profit, or all that kind of thing. You can have short print runs, so you can have print on demand. And of course, one of ebooks, of course, has opened up a whole world. And it's opened up a whole world of self-publishing, which I've dipped a toe in the self-publishing wars, right? Just as an experiment. I'd written a number of Sherlock Holmes short stories, so I did a little ebook, the new mysteries of Sherlock Holmes, and that's done well over a number of years, and that was quite an interesting thing to do. But I think that maybe more significantly in terms of my career, it's the way it's brought back so many of the older books that had disappeared. In the old days, once a book went out of print, unless it was by Agatha Christie, it very often stayed out of print, and that was it. Yeah, you never saw it again, and that was sad, because there's some really good, not very well-known books out there. And of course, part of the idea of the golden age of murder was saying to a 21st century readership, the critics have said for years that it's all rubbish and it's not worth bothering with. But a lot of it is worth bothering with, because there's more to it than meets the eye. Not every book, but at any time in history, the range of quality, there will be a spectrum. But there are good books being written all the time, and there were good books being written in the 30s. But a lot of them had vanished. But now digital publishing has made it possible to bring a lot of them back. And so people are rediscovering writers like E.C.R. Lorak through the British Library Crime Classics series, which I'm the consultant to. And Lorak, my parents were big Lorak fans, and so I used to buy them second-hand copies whenever I could find them. It's pretty hard to find them, believe me. I spent years trawling around second-hand bookshops looking for Loraks, and bringing back Lorak has been a fun thing to do. And Lorak, who's real, she was a woman called Caroline Rivet, and lived in her latter days in the Lunesdale area, North Lancashire. And she was one of those women writers who'd just been forgotten, almost obliterated, airbrushed from history. But the books have enjoyed a whole new lease of life, and that's been really, really rewarding to see these long forgotten books coming back. And it's through technological advance that this has been possible with many of these older books. And as I say, I'm not suggesting that all of them are masterpieces, no. But there's some good stuff there. Even the stuff that is quite dated, it inevitably gives you a window into a particular social world, a particular point in history, and we can learn from that. It's interesting. And there are lessons that can be learned from it as well. Some of the bad things that you read about also. So for me, that's been a very exciting thing that is largely as a result of technological advance and the changes in the publishing world, a world which is fast changing, I think, and that change is ongoing, even as we speak, with who knows how things will go in the future, but it's opened up in a really, really interesting way, I think.
Great. And our final question comes from Susan, the book trailer again, and I just love this question. What aspect of the golden age, so fashion, habits, lifestyle, would you like to see come back in the present day?
Well, I think that nostalgia is part of the appeal of these books for a lot of people. But I have to say that I'm very happy to be living in 2021 rather than 1930. Yeah, it wasn't so bad if you were the aristocrat in the country house, but if you're the housemaid, it was pretty hard work. But I think that in terms of what I would like to see restored today, definitely not the fashion, I don't think, and definitely not the police behaviour. But I think what interests me about these books is that despite the differences between the 1930s and the present day, what really interests me in life is the things that, it's not the things that separate us and divide us and that we disagree about. There's an awful lot of that around, but it's the things that connect us and the things that we share with the people of the past, which in many ways, and it's this point about Jane Marple, the eternal issues of human nature. So I think that the things that are enduring about human nature, you see today, and you saw them in the 30s as well. Things were very, very different then. It was a vanished way of life in all kinds of ways, and life always moves on. You can never go back, I don't think, in life. Things will always progress and change. They won't always change for the better in every single respect, but change and evolution is absolutely fundamental and inevitable. So yeah, we want to accept that. But I think that we can learn from these books of the past, and we can also enjoy them on their own merits as good entertainment. And of course, there are many of the elements of modern crime fiction that derive from the 30s. It was a time of great innovation in terms of literary technique. In the discussion in the review discussion, very interesting mention of Joseph Knox, very interesting, very talented writer, his book with the emails and so on. This is a modern iteration of a kind of storytelling. You find it in Dorothy L. Sayers, a book called The Documents in the Case. There weren't emails then, but it's a version of the same idea. So there are quite a lot of very interesting storytelling techniques, which quite a number of contemporary writers are latching onto, people like Alex Pavese, Stuart Turton, and quite a number of others are doing it very, very successfully, and often quite consciously looking back to the golden age, as I'm doing in a different way with the Rachel Savenay books in Gallows Court, and particularly in Mortmain Hall, the second one. So I think that we can learn from these older books as well as enjoy them.
Excellent, thank you. And my question is, what's next for you, Martin?
Well, quite a few things.
What a surprise!
The next Lake District mystery, The Crooked Shore, is published in July. I've not written one for a few years, and this one's a bit different. I'm excited about that. I'm happy with that as a book. I've just finished the third Rachel book, and that will be published next year. There will be a non-fiction book which I'm not able to talk about just now, but that will be announced fairly soon. That will be published next year. And I'm working on a British Library anthology right now, and a crime writer anthology as well, before I get down to the next Rachel book. So that's me sorted for the next few months, I think.
Martin, I'm stressed just hearing your list. I don't want to do them. You're an absolute machine. So thank you for giving up your time tonight to come and talk to us, because I feel like you've got a lot more on your plate.
It's great, but well, it's all about enjoyment, whether enjoying this kind of event, which I do very much, connecting with people like yourself and the readers, the people who are kind enough to spend their time watching. It's about enjoying it and having fun, and writing is very hard work and can be discouraging, but it should be fun as well. I've
really enjoyed talking to you, and you had some real inspiration for me when talking about keeping going, so thank you so much for that.
Thanks.
I'd just like to give you a huge round of applause again. Martin Edwards, everybody.
Thank you very much. It's been great fun.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. And I have to say, reading or listening rather to that Audible book, I would also point out I didn't know I was traveling illegally, Vic, just before before I started getting hate mail. But the how done it is just absolutely fascinating, and the range of stuff, as Martin said, in it is just really. My wife, who isn't a crime book fan at all, when I said, do you want me to put something different on? She went, no, this is really, really interesting. So, it's not just for writers, and it's not even for crime readers, really. It's just great.
Excellent. I just want to answer one question that
I was going to say, I know.
Yeah, Linda, we are matching tonight. And actually, I've got a spare one here. Knocked over my son's toys. So if you guys want to get your hands on this Bay Tales t-shirt, it's very creased, so I hope you've got an iron, whoever wins it. Drop us an email at baytales20@gmail.com with t-shirt in the subject, and one of you will be picked at random to win this very creased t-shirt. So there you go, Linda.
Excellent. So we've got one more surprise for you tonight. As I mentioned in my preview section, Fahrenheit are releasing a bit more information each week in the build-up to the release of Derek Farrell's new book. So we're joining in the fun a bit, and are very happy to have Derek with us tonight. So if you've attended any of our virtual noir shows last year, you'll know Derek's not only a great reader, but also supplier of at least one of our quotes of the week. So with absolutely no pressure whatsoever, Derek is going to give us a little taste of the new book.
Thank you, Simon. And I just want to second Vic's comment with regards to Martin Edwards, really inspirational conversation and a really knowledgeable and inspirational guy to hear speaking. I thought I would give you the prologue and a little bit of the first chapter of what's now called Death at Duke's Halt. I'm not even sure if I was supposed to tell anybody the title, but it's out now. The book is available for pre-order at the moment directly from the publisher, Fahrenheit Press, and I'm on Twitter at Derek Farrell, so if you want to follow me there, you'll get release details and special offers and all the rest. Okay. She's running around the room in a panic as the people on the other side of the door hammer relentlessly. The sideboard has been ransacked. Piles of napkins and tablecloths are scattered all over the floor. Most of the antique dining chairs are toppled on their sides, the seat cushions discarded haphazardly. The ornamental fireguard is lying on the same Persian carpet where, a few feet away, a man is sprawled on his front. The back of his head has a deep, dark hole in it, and glistening blood is spreading down over his collar and shoulder to pool around his head. She's stopped now and is standing over him, a small dark pistol in her hand. Her eyes turn to me and she reaches out, the gun pointing directly at me for a moment before she stares at it as though for the first time ever and drops it. I can't find it, she says, panic mixed with despair clear in her voice. I've looked everywhere and I can't find it. Sunlight, thin and golden, catches the blood still crawling slowly across the floor. Help me, she locks eyes with me. You have to help me find it. Find what, I ask, as the pounding on the opposite side of the door increases. The book, his black book. Without it, I'll never find her. She steps back, noticing for the first time that, in her panic to search the corpse, she's gotten his blood on her hands. She looks at me, accusation clear in her eyes. He must have hidden it. He must have realized that you'd come to find him, and he's hidden it. She stares at her blood-soaked hands, her whole body slumping as though every last drop of hope is draining away, and then wrenches her eyes away from the gore to look straight at me. Oh God, Danny, what have you done? And then, with an ear-splitting crack and a splintering of wood, the door bursts open. Chapter 1, Wednesday. Absolutely not. I stare at my best friend in horror. Across the table from me, Lady Caroline Victoria Genevieve Jane de Montfort, Kaz to her friends, looked at me as though my horror were absolutely incomprehensible. But why not? Why? I was resisting the urge to ask how many martinis she'd had. Are you serious? Deadly, she said, sipping from her glass. It was George's dying wish. His living one, too, come to think of it, and if his father wasn't such a complete bastard, he'd have granted it years ago. Well, he mightn't have been able to do it in life, but I'm going to do it in death and permanently. I'm not sure it's even legal, I protested, and she snorted. It's probably not, she said, but a dying man's wish, and are you, a person who works for a gangster renowned for jointing his enemies with a large machete, really going to talk to me about legality? Well, first off, I don't work for him. I'm my own boss. He just happens to own the pub I'm running. And second, and you know this perfectly well, Mr. F has never been convicted of any violent act. So, you know, it could be nothing but scurrilous rumors that you're adding to by your insistence in referring back to unproven hearsay. He's known as Chopper Falzoni, she stated boldly, swallowing her martini, fishing out the olive and popping it into her mouth. She had a point, and that was the first solid I'd seen her consume in months. I tried another tack. How? I mean, the logistics. Leave logistics to me, she said, a smile that intimated she'd not only worked them out, but had had a trial run in Hyde Park settling on her face. No, I mean the logistics of this place. I'm trying to organize that cabaret night, Elephant's Got Talent. Despite the fact that this bar is not situated in the Elephant and Castle, Kaz dipped into her handbag and extracted a shiny silver cocktail shaker. She wiggled it at me and I waved it away. My own glass, still containing what I had discovered on first sip, was basically pure gin with a homeopathic quantity of vermouth. It's in the environs, I said. And anyways, the cabin boy and codpiece on Borough High Street already got a Southwark's Got Talent night on a Wednesday. Bastards, Ali, my bar manager, strolled over on hearing the name of her nemesis. The cabin boy had been taken over by an ex-hedge fund manager, and Ali was convinced the pub was stealing her customers at an alarming rate. She spat her condemnation and began polishing the bar with a rag so filthy she didn't polish so much as move the grease from the left to the right to the left, up, then down and back again, in a bizarre housekeeping version of the hokey cokey. Well, quite. I couldn't really argue with her hatred of the competition, but facts were facts. They were offering us Savoy-trained mixologists, leather banquettes, and a Sunday roast that delivered recipes by Heston Blumenthal to a selection of the ex-hedge fund manager's mates. The Marquis of Queensberry, meanwhile, served bottles of Czech lager that bore labels claiming the contents were brewed in Czechoslovakia, despite the country in question not having existed for 25 years or more. Our clientele could binge on out-of-date pork scratchings whilst lounging on bar furniture that looked like it had been acquired sometime before the Great Fire. Said clientele, in fact, such as it was, consisted of regulars who'd been coming here since the trouble with Europe was Joan of Arc, unemployed drag queens who still thought Daniel LaRue was recherche, and a selection of people who either came for the ambience or who, having heard about the ancient plumbing and rarely clean toilet facilities, came to test the efficacy of a new yellow fever vaccine. So who have we got lined up for the first night, I asked, and Ali stopped polishing, focused her eyes and I suspect her mind into the middle distance, and began to recite the bill. We got Benoit balls, French, no, she held up a hand, Belgian. He does something amazing with ping pong balls, works up to tennis balls, and the finale involves something jaw-dropping with a rugby ball. It's almost like being at the Folie Bergère, Kaz said dryly. Ali ignored her. We've got Lardy Gaga, morbidly obese tribute act. Comes on wearing a dress made out of sliced ham, sings the hits, finishes the night wearing only her wafer-thin chicken knickers, having eaten the costume as she sings. Brought the house down at the Rotary Club do last Christmas. And that, I think, is where we'll stop.
Thanks, Derek. Legend has it that it was, I think, Nelson Mandela's birthday concert. Stevie Wonder was supposed to perform, and Tracy Chapman actually had to come on because he had his disc stolen, and Tracy Chapman just kind of blew up. So tonight, Derek was our Tracy Chapman, which I'm sure you've heard so many times before, but patiently waiting because we weren't sure we were going to have some technical issues earlier on. So thank you very much, Derek, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Do visit the website to read more of, as I say, the first 3 chapters of the first Danny book from Derek is background on writing the character. You can also find a fantastic article Martin wrote on the art of the short story in our non-fiction section. All of it for free. And Derek, I'm sure there'll be much more coming out from Fahrenheit telling us a bit more about the book over the coming weeks. So,
oh, it'll be unavoidable. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I just have to say, I mean, we don't do quote of the week here because it's a bit of a different show, but Lady Gaga for me, 100%.
There's another t-shirt in the making there.
To be seen by me, worn by me for the rest of my life. So
time for good nights now, really, isn't it? And
yeah, that's about it.
Do you want to say?
I'd like to just say I wasn't trying to intimate that you knew you'd travelled. It was a joke. It was a joke gone wrong.
Those stolen diamonds weren't going to deliver themselves. So yeah, thanks to everyone for appearing on the show.
Yeah. Next month we are on the last day of the month, 30th of June. I don't think we're telling people yet. You've just got to keep your eyes peeled on social media.
Keep coming back to the website. We do put more stuff up there. It is all absolutely free. Submit your own reviews. And indeed, if you have a short story or a piece of non-fiction, we always love to get those as well. We do. And as another reminder, because we love begging you, if you have got a couple of spare pennies, do drop them in there. That would be great. I've got fines to pay now for traveling illegally, so you know I need it all.
A huge, I'm so sorry, a huge thank you to all of you for joining us tonight, to Sharon Bairden, to Martin Walker and to Martin Edwards, and to Derek Farrell, and also to Jason Isaacs for the wonderful halftime accompaniment. We will be back on the 30th of June. Keep an eye on social media and on our website, baytales.com. Thank you and good night.